So let's pivot from one superpower to the other, to China. And Canada is caught in the middle. They have reinvented the rules of international relations. There's even a word for their diplomacy now, wolf warrior diplomacy. It's very aggressive. It's not the Chinese diplomacy that many of us saw in previous years. And now it has moved on to hostage diplomacy with the two Michaels, and in particular, a career diplomat, Michael Kovrig. So 2 years in captivity in retaliation for the Huawei affair and potential deportation. While that was happening in the last few months, you caused a diplomatic storm of your own by asking the UN Human Rights Council to investigate China's handling of its minority Uyghur Muslim population in Xinjiang province and to investigate genocide. And China's foreign ministry, the wolf warrior diplomacy, kicked into action and attacked you quite strongly, personally. So where do we stand with China? How do you reinvent a diplomacy that protects our interests, that defends our interests, that helps to defend the interests and the rights to human rights of the Uyghur minority in China when everything has basically been turned upside down? How do you do that?
Well, I mean, Arlene has warned me not to give long answers. It's hard to give a short answer to a question about China, but I'll do my best. I think the first thing is that, you know, in my time, as you recall, as premier, I went to China a number of times because I thought it was really important that we engage as a province, that we understand that, you know, this was going to be an important relationship for us and for Canadians for a long time to come, economically and every other way. The China that we see now is different. I mean, it's not like it's suddenly transformed to something else. First of all, since that time, it's become a huge economic power. It's the largest creditor in the world. It has loaned a lot of money to a lot of different countries all around the world, and with COVID and the impact of that, they're now at the center of this economic crunch that we're facing.
And just to interject briefly, that's an important point because you can't just wish away China the way you can Venezuela if you wanted to, or China, or Cuba, or Iran,
or even Russia. I mean, when we're dealing with people talk about a Cold War, this is different than was the situation before with Russia. Russia was a strange combination of a crumbling economic power with a very, very aggressive, you know, political stance and a hammerlock on their own public and on the public of Eastern Europe in terms of their military power. They were fundamentally a military competitor, partly an aid competitor in some parts of the world, but it's very, very different. This is a different phenomenon. And so both on COVID and the economic output of that and climate change, China needs to engage with us. We need to engage with China on those kinds of issues. But we've also seen an increased authoritarianism. We've seen President Xi exercising a great deal of personal control. Everybody has to read his book. As you know, Martin, nobody reads my books, so it's just the way it is. You know,
that's not true because I actually have.
You can write them, but you don't necessarily read them. But there is an authoritarianism there that I think is dangerous, and it has, because it has implications for Taiwan, it has implications for Hong Kong, it has implications, as you said, for the Uyghurs, and it has terrible implications for the two Michaels and others who were affected by this positioning that they take. And
so
I think
if we can't ignore them, what do we do, and what do you do diplomatically?
Well, diplomacy works in different ways. My job at the UN is often to do things in public. It's often to do things in private. And I don't always talk about the things that I do, you know, in conversation or the various meetings that you have with people that are off the record. And you're just trying to share information. And that's an important part of diplomacy. It's also a reality that the UN is a public place. So when I called out China on their treatment of the two Michaels, and we've done the same thing on the Uyghurs, and we're not alone. Many other countries joined us. We had nearly 40 countries signing a letter indicating our views about the Uyghurs, which is quite remarkable considering where we started when we began to really talk about there's some things we have to say publicly. China has never been reluctant to respond publicly, and that's fine. I mean, that I think is part of the dialogue, but I think it's important for our own publics and for the public generally to know is we have a very strong view about the taking of 2 Canadians on trumped up charges as a response to what we did, and I arguably can say had to do in response to an extradition request from the United States. And I think it's been very, very difficult. It's been very hard on the people in question, very hard, and it's been very hard on their families. But all you can say is you hope that at some point we'll find a way to resolve it. But I don't think anybody should be surprised by the fact that sometimes you express your views publicly because it needs to be said, and sometimes you express your views privately because you may get more results that way at a particular moment. I don't think it's a secret, I can say it, I talk to the Chinese ambassador. We're not uncivil to each other when we meet, but they also need to know how we feel, and they have no hesitation expressing how they feel. That's actually a shift in Chinese diplomacy. They're much more, as you call it, wolf warrior, but I mean, in meetings and in conversation, they're much clearer about their views and why you're wrong and they're right. And that's part of what diplomacy is about.